Hey, what's up? Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining. This is the process of building out a newsletter platform so that creators can monetize their the newsletter emails that they're sending. And we have already built out authentication, being able to create a newsletter. We've added some styling with Tailwind UI, authoring an issue of a newsletter. We're getting to the point where we're ready to sort of send a newsletter, and we might want to integrate with SendGrid. But before we do that, there's a couple other things that I want to put in place. One is a background job service. We want to be able to run things in the background outside of the context of a request on our backend. We also want to be able to handle webhooks. So I'm going to move these two concepts or these two features up here so that we can do those next. So let's start with a background job service. Rails has a tool called Active Job. And Active Job allows you to create a class that represents processing of a job, or like the automation that you want to do, or the code that you want to run on the back end in a background job. And so we're going to use an Active Job, and there are several different sort of adapters that you can use depending on which tools you want to use for running your job. And one of those is called Sidekiq. This is a really popular adapter for working with Active Job. And it says that it's simple, efficient background processing for Ruby. There's also like pro versions of Sidekiq where you can pay for upgraded features and support and things like that. So we're going to start with the basic free version of Sidekiq today by adding the Sidekiq gem to our application. So we're going to say bundle add Sidekiq. That will add the Sidekiq gem to our gem file and bundle install for us. So it pulls down the dependency. Now, in the Sidekiq GitHub repo, they make great use of the wiki. So you can head over to this wiki tab. There's lots of different things that you might get into here. There's a getting started section where it tells you how to actually generate some of these jobs. And it also has a section for working with Active Job. The only thing that we need to do is to tell Rails that we want to use Sidekiq as our queue adapter. So we're going to jump into our application.rb here, come down and add Sidekiq as our queue adapter, and then we can just generate a job. So now we can say Rails G job. Maybe we want to process our webhook events in the background. So we can say event job, and that will create this new class called an event job in the app jobs directory. So if we can just let's just pop this open and take a look at what we get. Queue as tells us sort of which queue to use when processing events or when running this specific background job. The default is default, but you can set up different priorities. And then this perform method is really what's going to get executed when something happens. So this will probably take in some event, and then we're going to do something later with the event. So we'll route the event based on the source, and then we will handle all the event types, each source we're listening to. Okay, so for now though, let's just put event job event.inspect. Sure, that's great. Okay, and what else do we need? Okay, so then this tells us how we can actually execute this. So we're going to use the class method on the job class, and then we call perform later and pass in any arguments. So for instance, if we wanted to use this, we can say Rails console event job dot perform later, and then we would pass in some event. So we just put in test right now, and this will enqueue the job. This is trying to connect to Redis. We don't actually have Redis running, so I can open up a new tab here and I'll say Redis-server. That'll fire up a Redis server. The other thing that I like to do is, in order to execute all of the jobs that have been enqueued, so let's actually run this again. Okay, so that should be enqueued into Redis, into the Redis server. Now, one thing that we want to do is make sure that we're always processing the job. So by running this perform later, that is enqueuing the job into the database. The database being Redis. This is like a key value store, really quick, fast database. But in addition to saying perform later, we also need to have a worker or something that is pulling the jobs to be done off of the database and performing those, or actually executing those. So what we can do is go into, we can open up a new terminal and say Sidekiq, bundle exec Sidekiq. There's a bunch of different options you can pass here. Usually I do -C2, and that will fire up Sidekiq and start processing those jobs. So now you can see performing event job, performed event job, performed event job. So it looks like maybe it was using, I don't know if it was actually using Redis or if Redis was running somewhere, but it seems to have picked those up. Okay, so if we were to run this again, and now we say like test 2 and hit enter, now over here in our logs, we should see test 2 being run. And this is the log statement that we were printing out. Notice that the log is happening in the Sidekiq output logs. Now, rather than needing to like remember to fire up this processor every single time, what we can do is grab this and open up our procfile.dev and add a new thing in here. So I call it worker, and that's the command that we want it to run, so that when we run bin dev, it will fire up all 4 processes now. So now we have web, JavaScript, CSS, and worker, and the worker will fire up Sidekiq and start listening to all the Sidekiq things. So that's all good to go. And that is typically how I set up background jobs to execute. So now we have a basic event job and we have Sidekiq set up with active job. So we can now generate any sort of background jobs that we want and have those perform in the background later. In the next episode, we'll wire up webhooks so that we can start receiving inbound requests from other sources. And we'll talk about how we're going to sort of like enqueue the event payloads and process those in the background. And we can also use this same concept for sending emails later. When we call, deliver later, that's going to use active job under the hood, which will be really convenient for making sure that we're not blocking the UI as we're delivering all these emails. All right. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.